we were treated very much like guests and not at all like people that were actually being kidnapped, even though technically that's what you could call it.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
First off, Ben, thank you so much for joining me. You're just a legend in so many aspects of life, but definitely within the sport of kayaking, and we're stoked to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick.
So Ben, you've got all sorts of titles to your name. You've been named National Geographic Adventurer of the Year, maybe Hero of the Year, Men's Journal, Top 25 Most Adventurous Men. You've traveled the world. You've checked off, first descents all over the place in different rivers, canyons, and waterfalls. And I don't even think I could name all the different countries that you've listed first descents on. And as well as you've made so many different videos, like the River of Doubt, which I was stoked to be a part of with you. You've done Qdoba, Walled In. I'm not even certain how many videos you've made over the years, but a lot. So if you guys haven't checked out Ben's videos, definitely go check them out. They're always amazing. But you were recently in Colombia, which is what I wanted to talk with you about, on another expedition in your movie, The Return to El Guayas. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
And yeah, could you just tell us a little bit about why that river and kind of what happened and the story behind it?
Well, first of all, it was the first time that I had been on an expedition with our mutual friend Rafa Ortiz in 10 years or so, since a big mission on the Presidio in northern Mexico. So it was so amazing to be able to join back together with him. And of course, he's a veteran of many kayaking expeditions, and brings his past in Mexico City and his panache for traveling and for operating on a level that only Rafa operates on. And so that was a pretty amazing opportunity to get him on the mission. And so this particular trip was 4 or 5 years in the making, in boating with Lane Jacobs and going to Colombia with him over and over. He's a person that has been in our sport. I remember him as an excellent high-end paddler right when I was getting into the sport back in the late 90s. I think he was at world class at that time. He's been paddling for a very long time. And I didn't really know prior to this, but he was actually one of the instigators for so many missions that he and Rush and Tyler had done, especially in Africa. He's a guy that spends a lot of time on Google Earth, spends a lot of time poring over topo maps, and is just really interested in the actual geographic location, the geology of these places, the hydrology. And so he'd zeroed in on some rivers in Colombia, starting with a river called the Margua up in northern Colombia, that previously had been off limits due to the civil conflict that was occurring there. And as of about 2012, the country was progressively getting more and more safe. And so when I went back with him in 2015, all of a sudden there was this whole corner of one of the most hydrologically endowed, one of the places that has the most flowing freshwater on Earth, that had just opened up to outsiders for the very first time. And what we found there was just mind-blowing. A canyon that was almost twice as deep as the Grand Canyon, beautiful river. We met up with a French paddler by the name of Jules Domine that had landed in Colombia in 2012 and basically had just decided not to leave and made his life exploring Colombian rivers, taking people down the river, being a Colombian river guide. And so that was a really eye-opening experience, because I had gone to Colombia in my early days of expedition kayaking in the early 2000s. And over the course of 3 or 4 trips, I got pretty frustrated in that there just weren't a whole lot of places that you could actually go safely. And so I turned my attention to other places, Asia, certainly further south into Argentina. Yeah, once I came back in 2015, it was amazing to see the progress politically that the place had made, but also so amazing to see this portion of the country that I had kind of only dreamed of in those early years. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, that led to us getting to a river, a big tributary to the Amazon. And in terms of this political strife or this civil conflict that's occurred with guerrilla groups, sort of the last areas of the country to become safe enough for foreigners to travel, become safe enough to explore rivers, was this area of the Amazon front that's in the south central portion of the country. And so that's exactly where this Rio Guayas is situated. And I think one of the things that Lane does really well is he's not, I guess, unlike me, he's not just looking for the hardest possible portage. He's actually looking for this specific combination of gradient and water that's going to make for a classic river. He's a guy who lives on the banks of the Little White River in the gorge. And so that's what he really identifies. And that being said, he's not picking easy rivers. It's not what I mean to say, but he is actually in search of a river that's going to be ultimately extremely paddable, but at that sort of edge, that limit of runnability. But he's a guy, he's not, I guess, not as much of a glutton for punishment as I am. But that being said, he's got a sense of adventure. And I guess in 2018, we went after a few rivers, the first of which turned into maybe one of the most epic, sort of walled-in, hair-raising afternoons of my life, when we got boxed into a river in southern Colombia and in a downpour with no real option other than to just fire into the unknown. And so we pretty quickly left that river and went after what he said was going to be the principal goal of the expedition, which was this Rio Guayas that was going to take us a week. It had a really interesting access point where you drove out of the Central Valley of Colombia and on to that Andean front that leads into the Amazon basin. And then from there, we were going to float down some 50 or 60 miles, which for first descents, that's a pretty long, significant first descent, and take our chances. But as is the case for many expeditions and a lot of exploration, oftentimes that first attempt on a river is going to be a learning experience where you're not necessarily there at the right time of year. You don't necessarily get the right weather. You don't have all the logistics lined up. You haven't introduced yourself to the community yet. So there's a learning process there. And after 3 days on the river was at what we thought was, again, a really high level. And having had the experience a few weeks earlier of basically feeling like we just played a game of Russian roulette, we just got very lucky to escape. We decided to hike out, but we knew and we felt on this particular river, having spent 2 days in there and seeing this river mature from where we put on it as a small creek to what was at that time about 6,000 or 7,000 CFS, that this was an amazing opportunity to make an exploration of a river and not just like a steep creek or something, but actually a big river. And so we had a lot of desire to come back. And then last year, about a year ago right now, we'd be in the river trying our luck at the Rio Guayas, still not 100% sure what was downstream, but with what we thought was good weather. We had about half the flow this time around. We had 2,500 to 3,000 CFS. And it was also unclear if the security situation was entirely settled, but we felt like we had done enough due diligence. We had, being helped by Jules as well. We had done enough research, we felt, to basically take that risk and go down into this river corridor where, it's totally roadless. You can't call some community and see what's happening in there. At some point, you just kind of have to decide if the risk is if you've mitigated the risk enough. And so we went in there, and for 5 days, we saw one of the best, finest examples of whitewater that I've ever seen anywhere in the world. I put it on the level of, because as we got downstream, the river just increased in size, and the rapids were hemmed in by bedrock walls, but there was enough room to move around, so it didn't feel claustrophobic or too dangerous. But that being said, one of the main dangers in Colombia, in Ecuador, in the equatorial parts, in the tropics, boating almost anywhere in the tropics, especially in South America, is flash floods. You can get this sort of torrential rainfall that can literally take you by surprise, because it doesn't necessarily have to be raining on top of you, but the river can rise so quickly from a rainstorm, say somewhere upstream. And that happened to us, and luckily it didn't get high enough, but we had literally put ourselves and put our hammocks about 25 feet above the level of a wide river, like a big river that at that point was now 3,500, 4,000 CFS. And when we woke up in the morning, the river was within 3 feet of where we were actually hanging our hammocks in the trees. And so in the movie, that becomes sort of one of the most hair-raising points for us. At that point, we were far enough downstream to where it was going to be a real mission to try to hike out. We were going to be basically putting ourselves up onto the canyon, out into places where we didn't necessarily want to test our luck with communities that might be out there, that might not be as receptive to our showing up out of nowhere. As what we really wanted to do was stay in the river corridor, move quickly and sort of silently downstream, see the river, and then, start to learn the place before we just marched out into the middle of nowhere carrying our kayaks.
Right.
But over the course of those first few hours after we woke up, the river dropped dramatically. I've never seen anything like it. The river was at a point where there's no way I would have touched it, to dropping, let's say, 7 feet in 3 hours. It was insane. That's wild. Yeah. And, we're still probably double the flow that we had the previous day, which wasn't ideal for me. But, when you have Lane on the crew, and you have Rafa in the crew, and you have a lot of confidence in each one of those members to not make any mistakes and to stay in your kayak and, portage where you need to portage. We got in the river and had a good time of it. And, I guess that was just the start of reminding us that, even though we had the perfect flow when we put on, and even though, we had some good reports about the safety downstream, like, this thing is going to keep us on our toes through the very end. And it turned out to be the case. And we ended up at the very end of the mission. I guess I shouldn't give too much of the movie away, but we don't make it out scot-free. We end up in the hands of a community that was not anticipating our arrival, that saw us from a ridgetop. And from there, the mission becomes one of communication and discussion and basically negotiation of getting ourselves out of the Rio Guayas. But in between that hopeful put in and this crazy takeout where we've basically been detained by a group of indigenous people, we see this river that I would put on the same level as a Stikine, or it's hard to maybe even a South Salmon here in the United States, or some of those amazing rivers in India, a big river, because we were running it when we first put on at what appeared to be a very low flow. And when it spiked on us the next day, it easily handled double the flow. And so, I mean, you're thinking about a river that has a year-round season where we see with other rivers that when they get opened up, and when the best paddlers in our sport, like yourself, like Dane, like all these folks, when they get there, they're able to turn up the flow. And so that was my idea of this Rio Guayas is, wow, what would it be like to just, be able to open up this river to the world of kayakers, to see what kind of amazing flows and, amazing aerial tricks and all this new school mentality would do to a river like this. All of a sudden you'd have maybe even like a hard style Fu in the middle of beautiful, beautiful Colombia. Like it's really exciting. And that's one of the neat parts about boating with Lane is we're not just doing first descents that'll never be second descended. You're actually going after rivers that are pretty viable to the whole community.
That's amazing. And I mean, you've definitely done that a fair amount in the past, like the Rio Alta Seca trip that we were on. I remember at the time we were thinking like, oh, this is such an amazing river. Like this will be a classic for sure. And 10 years later, it's one of the, major winter destinations for at least North American paddlers, but world paddlers, like paddlers from all over and abroad and stuff like that. So it's cool for sure to go to these places and do first descents, knowing that might become like the next big classic run or like big destination. And it sounds like the Rio Guayas could have been that or is that. Now, being that we don't want to give too much away with the movie and stuff like that, and I highly encourage everybody to go watch it. But you do kind of get held captive a little bit, or at least held. I don't know if you say against your will, but like held when you're not expecting it. Maybe I don't know how you gently want to put it, but this was also the second time, from my understanding, that you've been held in Colombia. Is it just kind of the political unrest there? What is it specifically about, Colombia where you're more likely, I guess, to be taken, I don't know if hostage is the right terminology, or just kind of held captive until they kind of figure out what you're doing there on the river?
Yeah. Well, just to backtrack 1 second, just to be clear and fair, I believe, the Alta Seca was a river that had a lot of history even before we showed up with right. Tom McEwen and whatnot, and some of those like very first paddlers in Mexico. And one of the couple sections, I think there were a couple sections that we may have been the first to open up, but one of them has never been done again. So
you're right. And I've actually been asked several times to go back in there, and regularly I'm like, no, dude, I've been in there and I don't want to go back.
Yeah, I know. So you haven't seen me back there either.
There's definitely that aspect of running first descents too, is you never know what you're going to get. And sometimes it's pure gold, and other times you never want to go back. Or you're lucky to escape in the first place. But
Mexico and Colombia have a lot in common in terms of the the beauty of the rivers, and this sense, at least from a kayaker's perspective, um, of opportunity and exploration, and like a wild west of kayaking. And certainly places that are like, when you go down into Chiapas, or when you go over, like when you guys went over to Michoacan, or even up north where we were in Durango, like it's just as, you have to be just as much, just as sensitive to what's going on around you as you do in any part of Colombia. Um, and a lot of these problems have to do um, with our war on drugs. I don't want to be political about it, but them south of the border having a commodity that is greatly desired north of the border, but yet it's deemed illegal, has created a situation where there is, this struggle for power, and you have what are called narcos, and you have, but you also have political strife between the haves and the have-nots. I mean, these are places, as you and I are both, as all kayakers become so aware when they travel to developing countries like Mexico and like Colombia, that there is a huge chasm between the haves and the have-nots, and between subsistence level farmer and people that are just as rich as we have in the United States, if even, more rich. And so I think that, I guess I'm tiptoeing around the fact of saying that, that it is a totally different situation when, say, we go and run the Chattooga, or the North Feather, or this, even like something wilderness like the South Salmon. We basically in this country, we've set up a national park or a wilderness area, a regulated area where you're pretty safe, whereas out there, these are places that are still politically unsettled. You have a product that's been deemed illegal by one segment of society, and that's trying to be controlled. And it's just a huge amount of history that that I try to be very sensitive to. And so being detained in Colombia a couple of those times, in both cases, was absolutely my fault. I think that any normal tourist that goes to enjoy Colombia is not going to have any issue getting detained or running into the FARC or anything like this, unless they absolutely choose to go to an area where they know that there's a risk of that happening. That being said, I think that the most dangerous parts of any kayaking trip, whether you're in the United States or abroad, is traveling through the cities, in terms of getting robbed or getting in a traffic accident, something like that. But by and large, my experience, whether in Colombia or, India, Asia, across the globe, any of the 6 continents where I've traveled, is that these small communities, the rural communities, are the places where I find like those most treasured and most real experiences with the people. And even in the case of these 2 detainments that I've been a part of in Colombia, it's been just jaw-dropping how well they treated us. Even with the FARC, when that was a situation where that particular group was very much armed, has a history that includes human rights abuses. But we were lucky in that they treated us very well, with the utmost respect. They fed us while we were there. I mean, we were treated very much like guests and not at all like people that were actually being kidnapped, even though technically that's what you could call it. And it was even more so in this particular case in the Guayas, in that this indigenous community was literally trying to stand up for itself, and their fear in us showing up out of nowhere was that we were a part of a push to actually dam this Rio Guayas, and that we were showing up with our instruments and with our cameras and with our GPSs to make some measurements and put, some final details in place to dam their river. And so they, as an indigenous community along the banks of the river, they were just saying, wait a minute, you got to come up here with us. We want to find out who you are. And we don't want, we don't want our river dammed. We don't want people just coming in as a free for all and doing whatever they want. Because certainly it's happened in other places, whether it's big mines, big dams. And so with the Guayas, maybe unlike previous kayak movies that I've done, where certainly we've talked about the issue of large-scale hydroelectrics. We've spoken a little bit about water quality, that sort of thing. This one was specifically makes a turn to the issue surrounding our mission becomes one of, will this river exist for the next group of kayakers? That was the thing, is that we found this river that was so perfect for whitewater kayaking, and all of a sudden we're thinking, gosh, is it even going to exist in 5 years?
Wow.
And so our time spent with that group and them detaining us really allowed us to stop and pause and ponder, what it was for them to live along the banks of this river, what sort of sovereign right they actually had, and potentially what we could do to try to spread the word about the river.
That's amazing. And it really goes on to a whole different, subject where, like what you're talking about with dams coming in and essentially uprooting entire communities. And we've seen this, around the world in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different countries. Africa and the White Nile is the first one that pops to mind for me. But where it really comes to the fact of, if you're taking away their entire community, history, livelihood, everything, who is it to, have that right to come in and put the dam in? And so therefore, is it not their right to at least question you when they see you coming through and they're like, whoa, 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 maybe you should come with us for a second. And we've got a couple questions to ask, like, what are you doing here with these, instruments and cameras and all this kind of stuff? And so, maybe them just asking you to come and questioning you and then figuring it all out and being, civil and nice about it, feeding you guys, taking care of you, technically might be considered, being held hostage or whatever. But at the same point, maybe it's them just doing their due diligence and making sure that their livelihood can stay, afloat for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a big learning experience in 2016 when we got held by the FARC, and just afterwards trying to communicate what had happened and what had gone down, and throwing out the word hostage and that sort of thing. It's just such a loaded term, especially when you think about what has happened to some hostages in the context of that word,
Right.
Whether it was a political situation or whether it was a money situation. It doesn't seem fair to use that word for, the four of us getting fed, getting taken care of, never being menaced, and then also using that same word for someone who's tied to a tree with a chain,
Right.
So I think that was something that certainly Jules wanted to be very careful about in the Epiporis thing, and something that he felt that some of the initial reports got wrong and that they just wanted to grab on to, four foreigners, taken captive or whatever. him as someone who lives in Colombia and who loves Colombia and who wants to promote certainly river tourism, river activism in Colombia is extremely sensitive to that. So that was a learning experience. And so by the time we showed up on the Guayas, we had that. I had that in the back of my mind. Certainly Lane knew all about that trip. And certainly Rafa has spent so much time in Chiapas working closely and trying to communicate clearly with the Zapatista people, that like for him to be there with us as a native Spanish speaker, as someone who spent so much time in Chiapas with the Zapatistas, was just gold. Like he never, obviously he never sweat. He never never got frustrated. Like he was just so much more calm, and maybe even either Lane or myself, that he was just like our centering, the person that we all sort of rallied around. And not only us, but I felt like the community there was just so attracted to his bright, positive light, his communicative personality, his good humor. And that made a huge difference.
That's amazing.
And so we just immediately followed his lead in that way. And it did become an experience where, like, I remember most, if not all, the people in that community so fondly. And, I'd love to be able to go back, and because the one thing that did happen is we were forced to, or we were given no option to go downstream. And so they accompanied us to the nearest village that was basically our takeout. And so we missed probably a half dozen of what would have been the biggest rapids on the river. Like if any of the folks have seen the latest edition of Kayak Sessions, where there's maybe the biggest rapid in the photo essay, is that very first photo. What we anticipated from the satellite imagery is that there was going to be 6 more of those right to the takeout. So that was a little bit bittersweet, but the opportunity for communication and the lead of Rafa and the guiding of Lane to this place, and all of us just sort of as a group being open to the experience, but also wanting to clearly communicate and feel like we wanted to clearly communicate with them so as to not be taken advantage of. Like we wanted to make it very clear to them that we're not millionaires. We're not trying to take advantage of their community. But at the end of the day, I did have my camera there. I did feel like this was an experience that I definitely wanted to retell, that I had already envisioned making a film about it. And so there was a trade for, them essentially giving us their blessing to make the film, giving us our footage, because they had taken all of our electronic equipment with the fears that we were going to use it for nefarious purposes. And so we did make a trade, and we did pay to get our footage back. And at the end of the day, we really felt like we had made a payment to support that community. And in that, it wasn't something that we had anticipated going down there and spending that money to, on the river. Usually as kayakers, we're sort of the dirtbag mentality. The 3 of us, we rode on a bus from Bogota. We spent $15 to get to the trailhead. Then we spent another, 20, we were doing it just in the classic dirtbag kayakers way. That's how we survive. Yeah. And, but all that said, and with the initial frustration of being felt like maybe we were being extorted for money, after it all came out, and after we were escorted down to the village, and after we had actually interviews and had a whole meeting with with the larger town, with members of the police and members of the military, including this indigenous guard. We felt like these people were one of the best hopes to actually protect a river like this. People who live there, people who are there every day, people who have a vested interest in, keeping the development that would basically end their way of life out of there. So with all of that said, I very much would like to go back and to show up once again, maybe this time from the bottom, ask permission to finish the river, but more importantly, just to see what's going on, see how they're doing, because they're certainly in a very tough situation in terms of what can they actually do. Yeah. They certainly had plenty of luck detaining, 3 kayakers, but when it comes to actually standing up against the huge money that is this multinational that wants to dam the river, that's a whole different situation.
Right.
So I think that all the support that I could possibly muster, that, luckily Jules is there, and he's working with an academic out of the University of Florencia. And Florencia is the capital of this state where the river exists, called Caqueta. And so they're standing up. They're looking at really putting in place an infrastructure that could help to litigate and could help to put up legal roadblocks to just the damming of these rivers. Because one important aspect that Jules just pointed out after the fact is that the entirety of the Colombian Amazon is still undammed, which is different than any of the other major Amazonian countries. All the Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Brazil, Venezuela, maybe not Venezuela, but Colombia is one of the last countries to not have any dams on any of their tributaries to the Amazon. So it's one of those places where it feels like if there were an opportunity, it would be there to stand up for. Wow. So, I guess it just kind of comes around to what I feel like has been transitioning in my mind in terms of thinking about these rivers, in that, I didn't enter the sport as a conservationalist or an environmentalist. I grew up in the suburbs of Greeley, Colorado, in a really conservative household. But man, having now kayaked for 20 years and seeing, I was just thinking about this river called the Cafui, just north of the Zambezi. That was this amazing river that we only scratched the surface on, that I think Fisher and Lindgren had opened up a few years prior. I went to with Chris Korbulik and Pedro Oliva, and just like next level sort of rapids that you would love to see. I think it was like a 3.5 hour drive from the Zambezi. That whole system is now dammed and diverted. And just to see how quickly that can happen, where literally I felt like I was there. It was, 2011, 2012. And then next thing I know, I look back 5-6 years later and it's gone.
It's crazy how essentially pieces of nature, like a river, like it's such I think of it as almost like a concrete piece of nature. Like this is a thing that has existed for, who knows how many years, centuries or whatever. And all of a sudden it's just gone. And everything that kind of feeds off of it is also gone. You mentioned the fact that you really want to go back to the Rio Guayas as well. What do you feel are your biggest learning lessons from this trip if you were to go back?
Yeah, well, I think unfortunately, because I used to operate under the pretense of it's always better to beg for forgiveness and ask for permission. But that mentality definitely changed quite a bit after Chris and I went to Myanmar, and just realizing that had we followed through with our backup plan to just go for it, we probably would have gotten some local people in huge amounts of trouble. And then just seeing how much the situation changed on the Guayas with these few days of direct communication with the people, I can't help but think that, maybe we could have had it all arranged and had all that communication already in place prior to. So I think that as much as I just want to go and jump in the river and just say the hell with it, and feel like, here in the United States, these waterways are public, and we have, we have this law to fall back on, although it doesn't necessarily play out like that in person. Like, I guess that's where my mentality has come from, is that we can, the waterways are public and that they should be free, and that like kayaking is this ultimate expression of freedom. That said, the relationships that you do develop along the way, and having permission, and going in with the intent of not only having an experience for yourself, and not only trying to share your experience with others, but being able to actually perpetuate the experience or open the experience up to others who might want to come. That's all part and parcel to leaving as good and as lasting of an impression as possible.
I was going to say that's amazing, because I've also, similar to you, I have regularly lived in this, with this mentality of like, beg for forgiveness instead of ask for permission in a lot of different ways. And I've also had that come back and, bite me a little bit, but maybe there really is something to it where just opening up more lines of communication really could be the answer. Kind of like what you're saying, where maybe in this particular situation, where if those lines of communication were opened up, now who knows, maybe they would have denied access, from the get-go, but at the same point, maybe they would have, given you their blessing. Or if you would have gone to them and had the approach of, hey, we want to come and make a video about your river and why it shouldn't be dammed, then maybe you're way more likely to get the blessing and help needed, versus, them having to take you off the river, question you, and then deny access for the rest of it, which it sounds like was the whole point of going there in the first place. We're like, oh, we want to get to these 6 big rapids, and unfortunately you didn't even get to run essentially what you were hoping and looking for the whole time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, it was it was very, very eye-opening, and just the whole thing, as I mean, it's one of the great joys of exploratory kayaking, which isn't always a first descent. It can literally just be your like personal first descent.
Yeah.
Which I think is great too. But it's that the river almost always surprises you.
right.
And even having seen the satellite imagery, pretty good satellite imagery, like it didn't really dawn on us that how the rapids were going to build like that to the very end. We didn't have that idea in our minds. Like we couldn't put all the puzzle pieces together of the bedrock, of the increased water flow, of the gradient, of the more pool drop nature into the puzzle to actually know that had we, like, my thought would have been that most of the amazing stuff in the river was going to be much further upstream. And there was cool stuff up there, but it's just like, there is a part of it where I still tend to think that at the end of the day, there are good risks to be taken, and then there are some that you didn't have to take. And maybe if we would have done a little bit more due diligence, made more contacts, just done a little bit more to sort of satisfy the question of whether it was safe enough or not to go downstream, we would have found out a little bit more.
Right. And I think that comes to the fact that you are this essentially like eternal optimist almost. And actually, Chris Corbulic, your longtime paddling partner, expedition, partner as well, made a short film about you, which I highly recommend everybody should watch. And I'll put a link to the show notes. But in that film, you say that you're an optimist that borders on being unrealistic. And you mentioned about how you need to be lucky in the sport. So obviously, the eternal optimism has pushed you to attempt and do so many things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise attempt, or just like go into these places with the idea that everything's going to just work out, in this perfect scenario. But maybe there is more that needs to go into it beyond just, optimism, and maybe, obviously having luck on your hand is one thing, but putting in that due diligence, putting in the effort on the, beforehand might also just be the key to success in the long run too. But how much luck do you put into, everything that you've done? Because there's so many things that you've done and so many first descents and so many waterfalls. Where do you feel like luck comes into play versus kind of putting in that hard work and putting in the grit beforehand?
Man, I mean, I can't, luck is such a weird term. I guess, luck kind of sounds like the good end of chance. And so, yeah, I think I've been really lucky. I just had my first major paddling injury just this spring after like a long time paddling, other than some cracked ribs and some things that seemed to be able to resolve themselves within a month or two. This was kind of my first like 6-month injury in the whole thing. And the way that it happened definitely opened my eyes to the fact that, yeah, I think I've definitely had some good luck along the way. But yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like hopefully I've increased my chances for luck over the years, just with some good decision making. I've certainly made some questionable decisions in terms of individual rapids, but I think by and large I've been somewhat conservative in certain circumstances, and then also I have really been into the planning and the envisioning part of these expeditions in terms of trying to really figure out and make myself available for exploring these rivers at the right flow, which I think is, 75% of it is just being there at the right time. There's just so many examples of rivers or several examples of rivers that we've been the first to do that we simply just were able to identify the right time of year to go there and not show up during essentially too high water.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, yeah, you still need a good amount of luck. But it's hard to really say, but you still want to have a good amount of optimism, because inevitably the most challenging objectives and the biggest rivers, the hardest rivers left to explore, the vast majority of people are going to be telling you that it's too dangerous and it's not possible. And it's not just going to be the villagers that live along the banks of the river. It's going to be the people that you look up to, and the people that you like, a lot of you wants to listen to, and you need to listen to that. But at the same time,
I almost think that goes beyond just rivers and paddling too. Like having optimism and is obviously, in my opinion, just a great thing to have, because you are going to have those people that tell you that you can't do it and it can't be done and it'll never work, whether it's a first descent river or whether it's, you trying to become a professional athlete, or whether you want to take on a new job, or anything in life. Like, there's so many things in life that unless you have that optimistic point of view, people will essentially just flood you with the no's and the can'ts and that negativity. And I feel like it's good to heed some of that advice for sure, and listen and try to learn and prepare for those kind of worst case scenarios. But at the same time, without the optimism, you're never going to take the attempt in the first place. And I would much rather live in a world where you go for it and you try it. And hopefully you take some of that, negativity, and you've prepared yourself before going into it, and have a backup plan or whatever it is. Yeah. But I think the optimism is kind of what leads people forward, and where progression comes from, because without it, we'd probably either just stand still or go backwards.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. It definitely spans all of life, and not just, exploratory kayaking. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another word, and I was just thinking about it, like a word to describe you that I think of when it comes to essentially first descent kayaking in particular, but just kayaking, exploratory adventure, would be like obsession. When I think of you and adventure, like, I'm just like, man, Ben is just, obsession would be the first word that comes to mind, in a good way, not in a bad way. But for you, is there like a perfect river? Because you've been for decades now, just been like in this search, and it's like you're always going after something new and always trying to find something else. And whether it's, again, a river, a canyon, a waterfall, or just like a way to do something where someone has told you, oh, this can't be done because of, this, that, or the other thing. And you're like, oh, I'm going to find a way. Like, you've got that, like, I don't know if it's like drive to search or just solve problems or what it is, but is there something that you're looking for? Like, is there that perfect river, or is it just that you have that desire to continue looking for what's next?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I can distill what it is, other than that when I started doing the kayaking missions, my first one being to Mexico and subsequent to Colombia, inevitably I would get to the end of those missions being more motivated and more inspired to go further and to see more, and to push a little further than I was at the beginning of the trip. And I think that inevitably has snowballed over the years. And so knowing that the part that's the hardest for me is actually just leaving, getting in the car, getting on the plane and going and taking the first step, and knowing that at the end is the place where, like, I get the most out of all the hard work along the way. Is like, that's, I guess it becomes the carrot on the stick, but also it's difficult because it can become difficult for me to even come home.
Right.
And then switch back into sort of a day-to-day living, which I think is hard for everybody. When you go out to the river, you go out on the weekend and you experience this amazing river, and then if you have to show back up for work on Monday, or, turn back up for what your day-to-day life, there's this switch where all of a sudden you're not just completely focused in the moment. You're not in the flow state that you were before. There's a transition there.
Right.
But the thing with the rivers is that I've found that there's so much work to be done, from the seat of my computer, or from, calling friends and networking, or opening up the topo maps, that you can continue to sort of pursue that dream. And, certainly for me as an aging athlete, now into my early 40s, it's become very evident too that that there's a lot of actual physical training that I need to do as well. And so all of these aspects, all of these elements, I've constantly still sort of chasing that golden moment of, you know, full inspiration, full commitment to something that initially seemed like, you know, maybe it wasn't possible. Like, and so I think that, yeah, there's got to be some ego involved in that, of that being part of my persona, and being able to overcome some of these challenges and open up some of these rivers. But I also like to remember of so many of the times when I've had to rely on the people around me, you know, whether it was the people on the Rio Guayas that weren't just saying that they were detaining us because of the dam that they were worried about, but after they came to know us, they were actually worried about our safety for other groups that might have existed along the way. Who knows? They might have saved us from this thing that we didn't even know about. And I can certainly say the same thing for so many of the boating partners that I've had over the years, you know, whether, you know, it was Rafa or yourself, and just the kind of group enthusiasm and commitment that we had on the Alta Seca back in the day, or, you know, Rafa on this particular trip in making the clear, concise, and amicable communication with the Guayas, or Lane showing me the way to the river and leading so many of the big rapids along the way. Like, and so that, like, camaraderie and that team aspect of the sport, where, like, you know, I know that I have some component of motivation and enthusiasm and optimism, if you will, to do these things. But I also know and am very well aware that so many of these missions, whether it was, you know, the locked in mission on the Berryman with the help of Benny Marr, and specifically Brian Smith, to help just bring that totally wild, far out dream to reality, or the Marble Fork with Forrest Noble and Jared Johnson, and them having the climbing savvy to open that up, or, you know, having just so many teammates over the years, like, you know, Jesse Rice, certainly joining up with Jules Domine, just all of these people that bring so many different talents to bear on these projects. That's the part that's, like, so rewarding. And to know that each one of these people is going through their own progression of staying in top physical condition in order to hike across the mountain range, you know. Certainly, yeah, I mean, in mentioning all of these people, of course, you know, Chris Korbulik and his mentality, without him being in the chopper in scouting the Berryman, that I really feel like without him and his enthusiasm and his commitment to that river wouldn't have happened. Or Pedro Oliva taking us there in the first place and being committed to exploring and taking us to the most far out and wild places that we had ever seen, whether it was there in PNG or up in Greenland. Like, that's a very rewarding experience. And that's something that I feel like is important for me to continue to remember and continue to be cognizant of, and continue to maintain these relationships, because, yeah, I don't even come close to doing these things on my own.
That's amazing. It almost sounds like this combination, this kind of perfect meld of, like, chasing the flow state, the adventure, the camaraderie and teamwork, all kind of, like, put together that builds up these, like, perfect trips and perfect opportunities, or at least maybe the most memorable ones, or the ones that are the most successful, for sure. And with all that you've done, I mean, you were just mentioning so many different trips, so many successful first descents and incredible, you know, rivers and canyons and stuff. What does the next 1, 3, 5 years look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it's like day by day at this point, but it kind of is. I think a lot of us, especially that had made our lives and our passions around exploration, or have been to some extent sitting on our hands, waiting for the right time to potentially go back out,
Right.
to try not to lose the lessons of these day and times that we're living through in this COVID pandemic. And
Yeah.
the thought that I'm sure has crossed all of our minds, that through all of this international travel, have we exacerbated, climate change?
Right.
And but also probably all of us becoming so aware that, like, how much symbiosis and how much hopefully mutual benefit that we've developed with a lot of these communities. We've certainly seen kayaking communities grow up and start to flourish all over the world, which is so incredible. And to think that we would just turn that off seems equally dismal to, the thought of putting too much carbon in the atmosphere with international travel. But all of that is to say that I feel like, yeah, right now I'm just right on the verge of lining up another trip, trying to explore another river, trying to get to know another community, another kayaking community that I haven't known before in Ecuador. Being aware Ecuador has got to be like one of the most well-known, somewhat well-trodden destination for international kayakers. And I think that perception, my perception of that in and of itself, kind of kept me from putting that on my radar as a place that I needed to go. But then, as Ecuador has been one of the countries that I think they've done a good job opening their doors in the COVID testing requirements, and I think that certainly they've been one of the first countries to really say, let's have a kayaking season. That put it on my radar, and then actually taking a real solid look at the country and the rivers there. And certainly hearing a lot about the rivers through Todd Wells, through Abe Herrera, through Small World Adventures. Thinking about Ecuador in terms of a place that has been done and explored is probably the opposite of the way that we should think about Ecuador. We should more think about it in terms of a place that probably has some of the biggest first descents left on Earth, and a place that needs our attention and focus as much as anywhere else on Earth in terms of the looming threat of large-scale hydroelectric development and these pretty damaging mining activities that seem to be popping up all over the country. So I'm very much enthusiastic and motivated about going there, and meeting the kayakers that live there, and possibly exploring a river.
Awesome. Well, I definitely wish you the best with that, as I know it'll be an adventure at minimum, and I hope you guys find what you're looking for, and probably help bring awareness to some of the things that I'm sure you guys will either uncover or have realized. And I look forward to seeing kind of what happens when you go down that journey. But Ben, thank you for joining me so much. Before we leave off, I want to take you to the next section of our show that I call the fire round, and I'm just going to just fire a couple quick questions at you. Do you have a favorite quote that you live by?
Do I have a favorite quote that I live by? Oh man, you're catching me off guard. Friend of the fearless. I think my good friend Devin Knight, his family supported my kayaking career for probably the first decade with with good, solid paying construction work. And I think he was the one who said, I'm not fearless myself, but I'd like to think that my friends are fearless.
That's awesome. I love that. Do you have a favorite book or a current book that you're reading or anything that inspires you along the way?
I've been reading, just right now I'm reading Barry Lopez's Horizon. And I think it's very inspirational, very eye-opening, very educational in terms of viewing our planet in a context of a historical context.
Awesome.
But I very much recommend it.
I'll have to check that one out. Ben, if you could go back in time to any time of your life and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh man. Okay. Yes. I'd like to go back to myself in 2009, Chico, California, and tell myself to buy a house. That would have been a really good thing to do.
Yeah, the housing market has exploded for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of a shitty thing to tell myself, but it sure would have been nice. There was a nice little house across the street from my best friends, the Robertsons, and that would have been a nice little investment. But for some reason my attributes don't lie in the investment realm. I'd probably be a much more it's debatable. Would I be a more successful kayaker or a less successful kayaker? I guess these are all expenditures of time. So,
well, and it all just depends on what you consider investments. If you're talking financial investments, maybe, but if you're talking about investments of experience, I mean, I don't know almost anybody who has even close to the list of experiences that you have. So it all just kind of depends on that view of life and view of where you're putting your investments. Ben, if you were to leave this earth today and everything that you've done, all the films that you've made, all the first ascents that you've done, if it was all gone, everything was erased, and you were only left a piece of paper and a pen, and you could leave 3 truths on it, what would be the 3 truths that you would leave?
The cataclysm sentence. If I could write one thing down on a piece of paper, I guess it would be that that there is some sort of intangible benefit in risk and danger, and I guess inevitably our mortality is a huge part of that, and just having the motivation to live every day to its fullest, and not taking risks to be flippant about it, or to disrespect the love and the care that those who brought us up had for us, but to take it to celebrate life. So I would say, take risks, live every day to its fullest, celebrate life.
I love that. That's amazing. And I think you're totally right, where all 3 of those are just 3 of the most important things. And there's, a vast wealth of knowledge in such a short little, quote right there, and you can extrapolate that into all sorts of different aspects of life for sure. But anyway, Ben, thank you so very much for joining me today. This has been amazing. My brain is just running in all sorts of different directions after our conversation, and I feel like it's always this way when I get to talk with you. If any of my viewers or listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for someone to connect with you?
Yeah, via Instagram, really. Sometimes I have some trouble sorting out like the new chats from the old chats, but I do try to get and communicate with folks. If you're leaving me a comment on one of my Instagram posts, or you decide to DM me directly, I try to, for anybody who's wanting to have some honest communication, I try to be available for that.
Awesome. And I'll have your Instagram in the show notes as well. Ben, I also try to add value to the show with all my guests on here. So, is there anything right now that you're focusing on that either I could help you with, or possibly my listeners or viewers could help you with as well?
Well, I don't know. I've had this thought, and I do my very, very best to resist the urge to tell people what they should do, because I think that there's so many different ways of going about life, and or let alone politics. But I do think that there could be, we could do a better job as kayakers, sort of consolidating our love for the river and our love for these venues where we practice our sport. And there's so many of us. I think that if taken out of the context of the US or Canada or, these little individual kayaking communities, we're pretty small and maybe somewhat insignificant. But when you take us as a whole across the whole planet, all of these rivers, and maybe not even limiting ourselves to kayakers, especially if we include the rafters, especially if we include the pack rafters, people who are on the canoes, stand-up paddleboard folks, I think we could be such a powerful voice and have so much unity. I think about the fact that American Whitewater is devised almost of equal parts Republican and Democrat in terms of party affiliation.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that the love for the river sort of transcends whatever fiscal, social beliefs, when you just have this very organic appreciation for the river. I just wonder if there's not some way where we can better collect all of our voices, if there's not some way where we can all make sure that when we share our individual experiences, because I think that that's a big part of it for a lot of us, not for everybody. We all know the soul riders that don't feel the need to post on Instagram or to, yell to the outside world that it's their experience. But I think that for those of us that do enjoy and endeavor to share our experiences, then just to always try to keep in mind some of the other things that are going on, as opposed to, I think one end of the spectrum is like a post that says splish splash, blah, 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 that has it doesn't have any connection to geography. It doesn't have any connection. It's literally just the feeling of it. And I think that there's a place for that. But I also think that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in one particular platform and in one particular way, but, whether it's joining an organization like American Whitewater, joining International Rivers, starting your own nonprofit organization to help protect or help clean up a river, and this is really just a note to self, is just trying to do a few more things, one thing a week, maybe even one thing a day, one small mention in a post to talk about something outside of ourselves and something that might lend to this community that is certainly one of a kind, right? When you can go to the other side of the world, go down a river with someone, and all of a sudden be best friends. And, in what other way does that honestly happen? So I think that if I were to ask you and ask your listeners one thing, it would be just keep that in mind of yes, our experience on the river, our individual experiences on the river are sacred and special, but so are the experiences of every single other one of these community members and the community that is going to come into our sport. And that if we don't somehow do more to protect these rivers and to hold up the community and to have a powerful voice, then we'll have rivers do you pronounce it the Ets? The Its?
It's, yeah.
we'll have rivers like the Uts in the heart of the European Union that are going to get dammed because of what?
Right.
You know, in my point of view, it's completely flawed to sacrifice a river like that for such a small amount of power. So I think that, you know, being able to gather our voices and speak positively and persuasively with shared real experience, and shared real experience to not only the foreigners that appreciate that river, but with the locals that appreciate those rivers. Like, I think you can do a lot.
No, that's perfect. And so I think what you're saying essentially is let's all just do our best to take part, to unite, to have a voice. And whether if you're already a member of American Whitewater, let's see how else we can help. And maybe that could be, you know, cleaning up around your river, or just do your part in some way. And I love that message. And I know that I personally, I mean, I live on a road with a river down by the end of it, and I see garbage out there. So maybe today I'm going to go grab a garbage bag and just kind of go clean up the road and river access and stuff like that. And I think there's always something that we can all do to do our part individually. And there's a vast majority of different ways that we can kind of do your part and what that kind of entails. But let's all try to do something.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think if nothing else, it just like will make you feel better. It makes me feel better when I just do one little thing. I'm just like, man, God, it just made all the difference.
Yeah.
All that crap that was, yeah. But anyways.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so very much, Ben. I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to talk with you. Thank you for sharing all your nuggets of gold and your lessons learned and the adventures along the way. And please, anybody out there, if you guys haven't checked Ben out on Instagram or social media, go check him out. Check out his incredible videos. I mean, he's got such an array of amazing videos out there. And I honestly hope that you guys were able to get some value out of this show. I know that I certainly did, and I always get value when I get to hang out with Ben and talk with him. And if you did, please, I highly encourage you to share this with someone else who you think might need to hear this message, hear this story. And that could be just simply sharing it with a friend. Could be copying the link and throwing it up on your social media. We would love to just kind of help share this out and kind of build a bit of a community around the whole thing. So thanks so much, Ben. I'm Nick Troutman signing off, wishing you all an awesome day. Cheers.